Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for February 13th, 2026. A little shout out to all the fans of February 13th. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and Ralph Kohler is sharing their screen. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thanks, Benji. We've agreed on to take a brief look at issue number 3531948. Top-level menu items in the footer region are too far away from their submenu items. Problem is the following. Oops, I forgot. Apologies. Sorry. Let's check out main. Just to illustrate the problem, call clear. If you are on a Drupal site, and oops, let's go to the file, media. Yeah, media is okay. If you're in here and you have in the sidebar the navigation module, the sidebar, and if you hover over one of those menu items that have a submenu, then the submenu expands. And as you can see, everything at the moment is aligned to the top. But as you can see here, the cursor is basically at the bottom of the screen, and then you have to go all the way up until you're up here. And problem is, if you, for example, are not sure, are you able to see that focus or the magnifier screen?
I see the magnifier screen, but I don't see that there's any change in what's inside it.
Yeah, because it's and that's the problem basically. Basically you're now in the magnifier. You see our color right now?
Yes.
Okay. And that's basically the main problem the issue is about is basically if you have now magnified, it's basically a technical illustration, what you could also simulate with, for example, something like the straw test. You form a loose fist, and then you have a small see-through, um, and that way you simulate basically a narrow viewport. I'm not sure what the correct term in English is, but a viewport maybe, or a visible view area. And as you can see here, you're down here, and now it's white. You have to go up.
So you're
You have
simulating what someone would see if they were using screen magnification.
exactly.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
And if you
that
go up, go up, go up, and then you finally see that. And if you have basically tremors, whoop, you have to go down, find it, go up again, go up again, go up again, and then you find it.
mhm.
And that's the main problem behind. And I'll switch again to that current test Finsky created based on the proposed resolution, it was just an idea. It's nothing convincing yet, to be honest. It was just an idea how it could be easily fixed. Um, all clear. And if you load,
So what you're showing so far is just the current behavior, right?
yeah, but now if you go down in the footer, if you go now here, it got moved down here, which has again downsides because the expectation is basically you look up here because the pattern doesn't change because the entire submenu bar spans across the whole vertical viewport. So
Right. And that's just based on whether something is in the main section or in the footer. And
yeah,
if in the position where we have announcements, if we had something with submenus, that will count as, yeah, as the top.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's not really um, a reliable improvement, although it would help in some cases.
Yeah. At least for the user menu item, um, the submenu gets in closer proximity. But yeah, for example, something like reports or configuration, the problem still persists. So
Okay, how about keyboard navigation? I have a feeling that doesn't work well,
uh,
but but maybe I'm wrong.
it's okayish, but it has issues. But that is something we are currently working on and revalidating. There was an issue. It's issue number. I happen to have it right before the meeting. It's issue number 3436130. Ensure keyboard navigation works with the drawer. That got fixed in 2024. And as you can see, the menu, the navigation orients to the menu bar pattern. Um, and yeah, as you can see, tapping works, arrow navigation works. Also arrow left right for opening submenus works. You can also opening by return, by space. You can also jump, for example, to the next. Let's say I want to go, I press P, I jump to P, I press R, I jump to R. So many of the key bindings that the menu pattern defines um, were ensured that they work, but there are issues still. So in particular with uh, 1 second, I'm unable to, yeah. If you smaller that and let's say you go into configuration, as you can see here, the focus remains at the moment in the background still, and then it goes in here. If you go down here, it collapses again, which is unexpected because at the moment it looks like it's a standalone menu, like the top level menu. Same if you, for example, shift tab, it goes back and yeah, those are details, but the general keyboard navigatability is not that bad. Uh,
Okay. But for
I
example,
am,
if I click on the admin submenu, or I'm logged in as admin, you're logged in as our
yeah,
caller, um, then a tab takes me into the submenu, so that's reasonable. And the
no,
cursor keys.
no, if
Oh,
you're here on here and if you tap, you go with up again. No, you have to press return
oh,
or space.
whoa, slow down.
Yeah,
Click on our color at the bottom,
yeah. No, clicking doesn't work. It's
and
only
then
hovering.
clicking doesn't, it works for me. I'm working in my own local copy. Oh, now it doesn't work. It's odd.
Yeah, that's the problem. That exactly the pattern we've discussed in the usability meeting back then. That top level menu items only hover. It's just the coincidence. If you click a top level menu item, you also hover it, and therefore it opens. But it is not opening because you click.
Interesting. Okay, but if I hover, then I
Yeah,
can tab into the submenu,
yeah,
which is so at least there's one reliable pattern for people using magnification, assuming that they can also use the keyboard.
Yeah, but or they can use the keyboard anyway, because you basically when you tap to the menu item and then press the return key, it opens, or the space key, it open and closes. So with a
And
keyboard, it's totally um,
and then
controllable.
once it's open, you can tab.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
but
what I thought.
the another prob it's not close to the spec yet, because for the spec also requires, as if you, for example, if you open that, the focus shouldn't remain on the top level item that opened it, but should be moved to the first menu item within the submenu. That is the requirement for the menu bar pattern.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to figure out what alternatives there are. So yeah, clearly there's room for improvement, but if if tab didn't work in this situation to get into the submenu, then people using screen magnification would have no good alternatives. So
Yeah. Um, just one problem I just realized might be I've switched back to the main branch. Um, Clearing. If I reload and let's say the pattern would be probably implemented, and I open now, and I have basically screen magnification on. I click on down here and the focus goes up. I'm not sure if basically the focus of that magnifier would also move up automatically. That I haven't tested. I would have to test it as soon as basically that focus behaves correctly. Because then if it doesn't move you up, then you have a even worse problem, because you have basically no indication that basically that user menu is open. You just have that white space down here, and you
yes.
have to move up, and then you find your focus again. And that might be an even worse problem, to be
Oh,
honest.
so you're saying that if you use keyboard, if you use tab to go into the submenu, but you're using screen magnification, then the focus is outside of your visible screen.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh no, I mean, if you basically if basically the menu bar pattern is followed closely, it would be the case that if you, for example, go down to that R color and now with keyboard and now press the return key to open the submenu, the focus would go to the R color or the view profile menu. And my question, and I wonder, is basically the behavior or the expected behavior if you press the return key and you have the screen magnification on, the focus down here would be lost and move to the view profile. But how does the magnifier behave, or the screen itself? Does it jump up?
I don't know. Either way, it's problematic.
Yeah.
So okay, so we have someone has implemented a small change, which is an incremental improvement. Any other suggestions on how to fix it?
Then the other point, I've discussed that issue back then with Kat and Shaw, and she also agreed that it would be desirable to have at least the option, like we've discussed back in the usability meeting, about that mixed pattern. Um, to have basically the option to decide which interaction pattern to use. Should there be the hover and that mix pattern, or should it be click only? But that doesn't really it fixes the problem of that if someone is using a pointer device and has basically tremors, that they could lose the focus for the submenu while moving upwards. That is the other problem that is
Okay.
included. But still, for how to fix that proximity problem, um, we haven't any other ideas, really.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm sure there are drawbacks to this, but that second column of the navigation,
Hmm.
instead of making it full height, you could make it large enough to fit the submenu with a maximum of the full height. And then instead of positioning it at the top, you could position it close to the thing you're expanding.
Yep. But let's take the most complicated example. How would it behave in the context of the configuration? Because if, let's say, if you use the pattern that if you have a small pop-up, then basically shortcut, the menu item label would align with the heading of that pop-up. So
Right.
it would be moved down. But in case of configuration, um, that wouldn't work because it even in collapsed state of all their submenus, it is still higher in vertical height than the available rest of the screen real estate available if you move that down here.
Right. So when you expand configuration, the second column would be tall enough to show the text there, and then it would move down, as you say, moving it down all the way to where the main configuration item is would bring it off screen. So you would
Yeah.
have to stop when you get to the bottom. So configuration in the first column would be aligned somewhere in the middle of that list. And then, of course, if you expand one of those submenus, you would want the box to expand again to be large enough to hold the visible menu items.
Yeah.
And as I often say, in the usability meeting, we have the luxury that we don't have to worry about how hard something is to implement. But and this is certainly the case. I understand that would be very hard to implement.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing that comes to mind. We could even keep the white background full height, but then have have the visible text in that second column move up and down to align with the thing that's been opened.
But that way you have again the problem like you had with basically the approach taken in the merge request, because with that submenu move down here, you had that huge white space, and it's always the question where the next where basically the submenu will show up, and that was suboptimal. And with the approach you said, using such just a pop-up with the height of basically the available menu items within the submenu, that way it's easier to process and easier to meet the expectations than having a full height submenu. That's tricky.
I'm not sure what your objection is.
No, my point is simply I move back to the other again. Uh, hmm. Um, my point is simply if you always have the whole submenu expanded, all that white box, and then having the submenu depending on which of those you expand, then those would move in and the white space above and underneath varies and the position, and that way um, it's hard to orient. But if you have basically just a pop-up that is not the entire vertical height, but just the height of the available menu items, that way it's easier to grasp visually what to expect and where to look. Not sure if it was clearer now.
Okay, so you're saying that, I mean, I really suggested two variants, and I would want to see them both in action before deciding which one I like better. And the first variant is that this entire second column is just large enough to hold the submenu.
Yeah, that is what I meant.
And
With that variant, it would easier visually to understand where it opens up and where it's positioned, and instead of having the entire column still and just move basically those menu items in close proximity.
yeah, I would like to see both options, and I think it should be relatively easy once one is implemented um, to show both options, because it's just a question whether the enclosing div has a white background or a transparent background. Um, at least that would show the visual effect. I suppose you probably wouldn't be able to click underneath the structure menu if there's a div there, even if it has a transparent background. But there's at the moment there's nothing to click there. Um, but anyway, do you think that would be better than the current situation?
Like you, I would have to see it and test it, to be honest. I can't say for sure. The only thing, if I remember correctly, in earlier implementations of the navigation module, I think that sidebar was just such kind of pop-up, not spanning across the entire vertical viewport. But I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was the case.
I certainly don't remember.
Me neither. I only have a vague memory about it.
And I guess if our goal is to avoid having this big blob of white space next to the main menu item that you're expanding, really the only two options are, um, I mean, you have to move the text down to be close to the thing you're expanding, and then it's really those only two options. Like do you or do you not keep all that at white space up to full height.
Yeah.
Um, so as I think about it, I think my first suggestion was the only suggestion, but with two possible variants.
Yep. There aren't that many options, unfortunately. Oh, and I just, because we've touched it before in regards of that interaction pattern, I just found a link. It's on nisannngroup.com articles and menu dash design. And in point number 13, um, there is the use click activated rather than hover activated submenus. Hover is not universally available. Users on touchscreen or those who interact primarily through a keyboard do not have access to content hidden under hover. If your menu exposed on hover, you'll need to provide these users with a backup way to accessing. It's better to have a consistent, reliable interaction pattern across devices and input modalities. In addition, accessibility triggering and dismissal of hover-activated menus is frustrating to all users. And in particular, that last sentence happens to me often, and also saw you run into it during meetings once or twice. So said that accidental, oops, why isn't it underneath that accidental, yeah, where that one X opens and you have to go back. That happens to me also from time to time. Or the other way around, that it closes unintentionally.
My bank's website has a similar problem, except that instead of expanding out horizontally, it expands out vertically. And if I hover over the wrong section of the header, then I have essentially the same problem.
Yep.
Um, and that is one of the recommendations we made in our initial review of the navigation menu, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, if only they listened to us. Um, well, at least it's good that or it's satisfying that we got it right as validated by the Nielsen group. And thanks for finding that. So now we have something we can point to and say, see, this isn't just our opinion. This is the accepted standard.
Yeah, but to be honest, to be fair, that point about having that hover is not universal available users on touch screens or those primarily using the keyboard, that is covered basically because the keyboard navigation is available and you're able to handle things. That's a good one. It's a good thing, but still for people interacting, there you have always to think, now here I hover, here I have to click, and that mixing of patterns, that is tricky. And also, yeah, as mentioned in the last sentence, those accidental triggerings or dismissals are problematic.
What is that item 14?
14.
Avoid multi-level cascading menus. Is that what we're trying to implement here?
No, basically, the navigation sidebar is the top, is that here, and our submenu is this one. that cas multi-level cascading would be if basically if you go in here, if that one would be another
I see.
submenu. That is basically the approach that Chin toolbar took. Um, there you had two, I guess even three submenus. So it spanned across over here.
So are we currently implementing the mega menu pattern? Do you know?
In regards of keyboard accessibility, it's the menu bar pattern that is implemented.
Okay.
But in a air quotes free way, it's not closely sticking to it. It's overlapping with the disclosure pattern. Had a bit of discussions with Kent the last few days in that regard, because yeah, there are issues left still. But one thing I would be curious, it's not directly it's related to this topic here, but what you would be thinking if you go to that page, you have the local tasks of content, blogs, comments, files, and media, while in the sidebar you have blogs, content, files, and media. Do you notice
Sure.
something?
One is alphabetical and the other is mostly alphabetical, but content has been put to the left because it's the default and most commonly used one.
Yep. And
Oh, I'm missing something. Blocks, content. Oh, comments.
comments is missing.
Uh,
Yeah, so
um, so that's basically because there's two different systems. The primary and secondary um, tabs or local actions are
Mhm.
a different system from the menu system, and the navigation is based on the menus. And there's nothing keeping the two systems in sync, right?
Probably, but still, just from a usability perspective, that is basically for one shape shifting because you have to reorient, you have two different orders, and also you have isolated objects because comments are missing there.
Yep. I'm just trying to explain why it
Yeah,
happens
yeah,
that way.
yep, agreed.
I'm not suggesting it's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, but I was just curious if you would agree that the order should be identical and also, strictly speaking, comments, if they are shown here, I would also show them there.
Um, yes and no. Um, yes, if you have just installed the standard profile, they should match. But no, because I don't think there's currently a way to keep them in sync because they are two different systems.
Yeah,
So the default behavior, yes, we should make them consistent in the same order and have the same items.
yeah. But
Um,
ideally, it would be good to keep them in sync also. That would be the ideal state from my perspective.
okay, but and 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 you're citing the principle that I mentioned before that in the usability meeting we're not concerned with implementation, but since I only observe that when I want to, um, I'll just say that as part of the issue to add the navigation bar to the standard profile, that would be a good time to sync them up for the default profile
Yep,
or standard profile.
agreed, agreed. Okay, so to summarize, in regard of the issue at hand, our recommendation would be to try two approaches and compare them. One that keeps the submenu spanned across the entire vertical viewport and then just move the submenu to in the close proximity to the top level menu item that opens it. And the second approach, which would be probably preferable, is the one instead of spanning the submenu across the entire viewport, the vertical height is basically close to the height of the submenu items at hand.
It would have to dynamically change as you expand second level.
Yeah, exactly. Correct. So that would be basically the summary or gist.
Yep.
Okay. And there is an issue for that order and keep on also moving the comments there. I can look that up, but maybe there we could, one second, I can quickly show, where is it? Because, yeah, that's the issue. Make the order of the menu items in the cont menu consistent with the order of the primary tabs on admin content. It's issue number 3427680.
Is that 680 or 660? Am I
Uh,
looking?
Seconds. My eyes aren't that good recently. 3427660. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Um,
Uh,
and at the very least, we could add a link between this and the issue. I assume there's an issue to add the navigation module to the standard profile.
Um, I'm not sure if there is,
Huh, I'll
but
have a look.
okay. Yeah, but basically, yeah, there was no movement there. And the other issue is basically where's the usability meeting? Yeah, that was the issue. Issue number 3439, oops, 012. That was the feedback from the usability meeting back in March 2024. It was issue number 3438905.
Could you put those links into the Zoom chat, please?
Yep. That is the usability meeting. That is the review we did, and there is basically that interaction pattern, point one, with the hover and the click we've talked about today. And this one is the order. And you also have to take into consideration the RTL and LTR. That is another detail in that context. And have you taken a look at Drupal Canvas yet?
I've seen a few presentations on it. I haven't tried it myself.
Okay, because um, talking of that is another one I've already filed, but one quick, we have a time left. Could quickly I start up a site because in not Drupal Canvas per se, but what they did with that sidebar is also quite yuck. Because the terminology they've chosen and how they laid out things leaves quite a few question marks above at least my head when I was using it. And okay, it's cms.ddev. As you can see here, you now have pages and you have CMS.
What does
And if you
that
go,
do?
pages are basically canvas pages. Those are basically
Ah,
landing pages. And
okay.
CMS is basically content.
So
And
presumably more structured content.
no, not necessarily. CMS is also structured content because CMS is basically are the content types. The entities are the nodes from the content types, the different ones.
Okay.
And those are structured. Pages not necessarily are structured, but also the question, are pages no content?
Yeah.
And also the question is, are pages not part of the CMS? And is the CMS Drupal? And many questions. Also the question, yeah, here it's called content, here it's called CMS. And also the order is switched. Here's content first, here's content second, here's pages second, here's pages first. Those choices are questionable from my point of view.
Yes, I see some confusion there.
Yeah. And yeah, that's therefore I thought it's sort of related to the problem we have here. And those should be consistent. Otherwise, you increase the cognitive load to the user. Either way, for experienced users as well as novice ones. Novice ones might have no idea what it means, and on the other way around, experienced users may have more questions than the novice ones. Therefore, problematic.
Can you go back to that screen?
To this one,
No. The
this one.
Yes. So again, talking about an ideal world where these two hierarchical structures are kept in sync.
Hmm.
I would want the same icons that show in the navigation bar to show on the primary tabs
Yep,
because and that would sort of reassure me that those are actually the same link.
yep. It's basically the concept of masked objects. You have no way to distinguish which object is content, which object is blocks, which object is comments. You have to read first and then also comprehend it in the correct way. And it's the same problem. It's another issue I've raised. the context of navigation in here. Also, masked objects. You have no idea what entity type that actually is, because you could have basically an a media type that's called article. You can have a content type that's called article. You can have a comment type that's called article, a media item that's called article. And you could have three different articles, and you have no way to distinguish which is which.
I see. So under the create menu, you'd like to organize things by entity type using, not that we would use that language in the menu, but
Basically, there are two issues. I've opened an issue where I've suggested simply like what you've suggested for the local tasks to simply add the icons as a prefix to that label here. That you have basically the for basic page you have that icon here for
okay.
image and so forth. And another issue that's open is basically to group them. That you have a group of content types and that the group label has an icon, and underneath you have all the entity types for that, and then the next. But from my perspective, it might be even make sense to add a display option, because depending on how many entity types you have and or your personal preferences, one person might prefer one way to display it to group, others might prefer to have a flat list. Either way would be helpful from my perspective.
Right. And the site builder might name things in a way so that you don't have the ambiguity. You don't have an article media type. And then they might want a flat alphabetized list because they don't
Yeah,
want people to think about whether what they're creating is a node or a taxonomy type vocabulary or a media type.
exactly. 1 second, I have both issues here. Um, issue number 345066 is the one I've opened. And the other one is by Pamela, issue number 3457729. I also pasted in the chat. It's grouping or prioritization for items in create menu. That's basically there. And then, yeah, that mockup also misses icons. And I still think icons to provide visual cues and to prevent people for the need to actually read and process um, is necessary and helpful. Yeah, and there I've created basically a mockup. How it would look like in a flat list.
Uh-huh.
But as you said, if someone has more explicit a naming pattern, then a flat list might be preferable, while in smaller lists and with not that much mindfulness about the naming, something like that would be helpful. How, I think to leave the option how the list is displayed would be helpful for the
Uh-huh.
user.
I agree.
We've covered quite a few issues today.
But we're only making recommendations on one of them.
Yep, that for sure. But still, all those others, I guess, should be covered ideally before it goes into the standard profile. Or, yeah, not necessarily. At least that one should be covered from my perspective. Making the order consistent between the main sidebar and the local tasks.
Uh-huh.
That should be done before standard from my perspective. The others might go in later if there isn't the time left, but that one I consider important. Okay. Um, yeah, I can leave a comment on this issue. And not sure, should we leave a message on any of the others?
Uh, the one thing that I have in mind is assuming that I can find an issue to add the navigation module to the standard profile, I will link that to the one you opened about the order menu items.
Ah, okay, okay. Just profile, Drupal. Ah, found it. Google was faster. Where's the link? It's issue number 3560117, add navigation to the standard profile.
And that, of course, is a meta issue. So
Oh,
maybe we could make the other one a child of it.
yeah. Or, yeah. Yeah, that might be a good idea. And I guess also the accessibility meta issue should be a child of that one. Hmm. Nice. So I stop sharing. And we also close to the hour already. So
Well, thank you.
thank you.
And yeah, I should be able to make the meeting next week. Hopefully we'll have a larger crowd.
Yep, hopefully.
So
Hopefully.
have a good weekend.
Likewise. And yeah, we'll read
Bye bye.
online. Okay, bye bye.